Thanks so much for joining us. As you're joining, please let us know where you're coming in from, just in the chat. We'd love to see where everyone is in the world and around Australia. We're going to get started pretty quickly today because we have quite a lot to get through. So good morning, welcome to Giants Weekly. My name's Danny, I'm part of the Blackbird team, and today we're really excited to have performance consultant Andrew Horsfield here with us. So Andrew is going to be sharing some practical strategies to help leaders, managers and founders deliver under stressful and demanding situations. So not only will he do this, but he's also going to show you some strategies for delivering really valuable work under those circumstances. So it's going to be a great session today. Please, as always, post your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat function, and we will leave 10 minutes at the end to get through those questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew now. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great, thanks, Danny. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I spend most of my time working with ambitious people trying to get hard things done. So it's really nice to be able to speak to a group like yourselves, founders, business owners, chief operating officers who are trying to do really valuable work. And I wanted to start by sharing the model that probably underpins a lot of the work that I do for two reasons, but I thought it would set up the context for our conversation today, and that is really to start thinking about success, however that's defined for you, needs these three elements of performance, potential and pressure to be in alignment for us to really achieve the things that we want to achieve in our business and our life. And so if you look at that sweet spot in the middle, success is hard to achieve because it needs alignment of these three things. And as soon as we start to find a misalignment, we start to find ourselves finding work a little bit more difficult or tenuous than those sweet spots or flow that we know creates. And there's two things I want you to start thinking about as you look at this diagram for our conversation as we move forward. The first is that when you look at the diagram, for the work that we're going to be talking about, it's our potential, whether that's yours or your teams or your organizations, our potential under pressure is what drives levels of performance in our business or ourselves. And also the fact that when any of these three things are out of alignment, our performance starts to get impacted. And so while we have to be great at achievement and having metrics and knowing where we're going and measuring our results, we also have to be great at alignment as leaders, because we know success is very rarely a straight line from A to B. And so if we have the skills to be able to find our way, not lose our way when things get tough, it helps us drive performance in those moments where we need to realign these three circles. So let's sort of unpack that and explore that a little bit more, because when we get the demanding context, if you like, gets created when those three circles are out of alignment. And that may be because we've lost a key client, or we've lost a critical staff member who's been part of our startup and has all the knowledge and intel and is left to do their own thing. Or it could be because you completely feel overworked, overwhelmed and overconnected with all the things that you've got to do. So we find ourselves in this dip. Or it could even be what we've all experienced recently with the global pandemic, where the projection of our results and our workflows and our progress has been seriously impacted by a pandemic that we're all experiencing. And so this dip, if you like, is just a natural part of doing valuable work where we're trying to move the needle on something, make a significant impact in the world or with our product. And it's that point in time where our aspirations for achievement are being stretched or challenged in some way. And we need to respond, because we know that being at our best when times are at their toughest is how we deliver high levels of performance. And I love this perspective by Jim Carrey, the American comedic actor, who said that the problem with life is there's no danger music. You know, if we're in this period of difficulty or we're about to make some decisions that might not help us move forward, it moves us back or keeps us stuck, we'd have that dun 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 going across our life, where we might be buried in work and we're working hard but not necessarily doing the valuable work that we want. and we'd hear that music to say, dun, 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 dun. It would be that sign to say, is this the best use of your time for what you want to achieve, or should you be doing other work? Or you might be in our current environment, sitting binge watching Netflix at night, and you think the probability of me getting up early to do that exercise, which is good for my mental and physical health, is actually starting to decrease the more I sit here and watch the next episode. And you'd hear that dun, 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 music, because it would help us pay attention to those moments where we'd say, I need to pay attention about the decision I'm making right now, because it's got some sort of consequence to it. And while I love the quote from Jim Carrey, I essentially disagree with his premise, because I think we have that danger music. And that is the tension that we feel, positive or negative, about either the anxiety or apprehension with the situation we're in, or sometimes we feel that positive tension of ambition and aspiration that's dragging us forward into new behaviour or new opportunities. So whether it's positive or negative, I think we do have that tension about the demanding context that we find ourselves in. That internal radar or intuition that lets us say, hey, pay attention to this moment because it's a significant one for you. And so for the time that I have, one of the key things that I'd like you to think about in terms of delivering results in a demanding context, when those circles are starting to get out of alignment and you've got that tension starting to play out to say something needs adjusting or doing differently, is that's what we know high performers and great leaders do. They pay attention to the tension, because what we know is when that moment comes, that what I call a defining moment, we know that great leaders define those moments, because success has no middle ground. When that moment comes, either you define the moment or it defines you. And what we know is we either choose well and we move forward, choose poorly and we drop back. And if we're so busy with our head down just getting work done that's not necessarily the right work, we often drift into the future and don't have an active choice at all. And so just starting to pay attention to the tension helps us start to calibrate ourselves to what's going on and what needs to be done to fulfill and do our most valuable work. And this is easier said than done. This obviously isn't a scientific MRI, it's just a graphical representation. And what I wanted to show you was essentially the areas of the brain, because there's lots of different parts of the brain that are shown there. But what that essentially shows you as a pretty simple graphic is, apart from the prefrontal cortex in the brain that pushes us towards the reward behavior, most of our brain function and structure is geared to keeping us safe. And that comes back to our historical upbringing when we were still hunting and gathering for food. We weren't going to Coles and Woolies or your local boutique grocer. We were out hunting. And the person who went into the bush because they heard the rustle and they sort of looked to find out what was going on, they weren't necessarily the people who made it back to the village alive. And so we developed this strong neural pathway and neural function of safety, which we know is the fight, flight, or freeze syndrome essentially in our brain. And so as we go to move towards better work, higher salaries, more impact, having the product that we're designing and delivering to put out there in the world to say, hey, I built this, then the parts of the brain that are going to help us achieve that also need a lot of work for us to pay attention so that we can fire up that prefrontal cortex and tone down those parts of the brain that are trying to keep us safe and protected. And when we can do that, there's 3 benefits that I want to share with you over the next sort of 7 or 8 minutes that will happen. We get increased focus, we have more impact with less effort, and as a consequence, we can achieve more results in a shorter period of time just by simply starting to pay attention to tension. So I want to give you 3 examples about those benefits from 3 different places. And the first one is from Hollywood. And I don't know if you know, but there's 2 types of directors in Hollywood. There's the traditional director who finds a script or writes a script and they go and get some funding, they find actors, they find locations, and they shoot a story or tell us a story in, let's call it 87 minutes. And they make pretty good money. But the people who make the real money in Hollywood and have the most impact when they walk into a room and get the seat at the table are the trailer directors. And they're the ones who see that 87-minute movie before anyone else. And they start to say, here's the 3.5 minutes, the key moments of that movie that's going to make you and I go and watch it. And they're super valuable because, metaphorically for you as leaders, they make the mental shift from having to see and tell everything to be able to focus on the right things. And the good trailer directors, they whet your appetite for the movie. They don't necessarily tell you the story. So I don't know if you've ever looked at Netflix and looked at a trailer and you see basically the whole movie, but just cut up into small bits. And you sort of think, well, I don't need to see that because I've seen the whole movie. So the trailer directors are really good at saying, here's the bits that really are going to get you and I watching the movie. And the example for us as business owners and founders is we have to challenge ourselves about not focusing on everything, but where are the right things that either drive performance in your business or that really get you a magnet for talent because you're looking after potential. Or when we're under pressure, that other third circle that I shared with you earlier, how do we respond in those critical moments where we rally together and we find clarity in the complexity or the chaos? So when you start to pay attention to tension, the first thing we start to do is heighten our focus about what are the moments that need our attention and what are the ones that we don't have to necessarily worry about or not necessarily right now. So the first one is we start to master the critical moments because we've got some focus. When we start to do that, we start to make this mental shift in our brain between what behavioral scientists call implementation intentions. So when we start to see these moments more readily and more often, not just feel them as pressure, but actually start to see which ones do I act on and which ones do I not, we start to leverage our ability to implement the right behaviors at the right time to drive the right result. And so the example I want to share with you is some research done in Australia. It was done in 2018 by the Australian Journal of Psychology or Health Psychology. And it was a pretty simple study. It was people trying to lose weight. And they basically had 3 groups: the control group, the motivation group, and the implementation group. I'm giving away the secret a little bit, showing you the stats, but with time, it's important. So what happened essentially was the control group went and saw a 2-hour seminar on weight loss, and they got some tools and tips in that 2 hours. The motivation group also went to that 2-hour seminar, but afterwards they got rallied into a room and they got the fist pumping rah-rah talk that we're all familiar with of a person who'd lost weight and the benefits of what it achieved for her life. And the last group, the implementation group, also went to that first 2-hour seminar, but the room that they got rallied into, they were asked to write down over the course of the week, when and where were you going to do your 30 minutes of exercise each day? And you can see in the results that just by having that implementation intention, being able to predict the future, if you like, of saying, these are the moments where I'm going to do my work, significantly increased our ability to influence and act in that moment. And so the thing that I want to share with you around that is once you start doing the focus and paying attention to tension, like the trailer director, you can also start to predict the future and look forward and start to say, where are these moments where I'm going to be stressed or pressurized or where I'm going to feel like I've got a decision to make, because that creates that implementation, which increases your probability of putting your skills to work to move that situation forward rather than backwards or maintaining the status quo. And so the last bit all around results, where this starts to compound as a process for you, is when we start putting ourselves positively into those moments, we start to build the assets of achievement. And so we move away from just doing our current skills harder and longer and more often. And I don't know if that resonates with other business owners, but we can sometimes just be working hard but not feel like we're getting the benefit of that effort, or that we just feel like we've got our head down and we're not getting to that really strategical, valuable work that we want to be doing. And that is that comfort zone, that part of the brain pulling us back into what's easy, what's comfortable, what our existing preference is, and not necessarily what's going to deliver the performance that we desire. And the example I want to share with you is from the world of tennis, with two players who at different times of their career faced a similar situation but handled it very differently. One did it from comfort zone, one pushed into results zone. So the two players are Lleyton Hewitt and Roger Federer. And they both had very similar games where they were baseline ralliers. They stayed at the back of the court, they covered the court beautifully, they never gave up, they ran down every point, and they wore a lot of opposition down by creating unforced errors. But as the game changed, and this happened at different phases of their career, but the game, the rackets got faster, they changed the balls more often, ball technology made things bouncier. We had the tennis academies that were producing younger, fitter players because they were starting younger and coming into the circuit a lot more developed. So it just became more competitive. And what Lleyton Hewitt did, if you look at that comfort zone circle, was he looked at his existing capability and he just did it more and for longer and worked harder. So he took existing skills and just did it more often. And that can be part of that comfort zone that we don't realize sometimes, where we take a situation where we're under tension, but we just take our existing skills and do it over and over and over and over. An example I had with a client last week was they were trying to reach a member of Parliament, and they said, look, I've sent them 10 emails. I said, well, what else have you done? And all they'd done is really one thing 9 times over. And that's sometimes where we get to, is to reach the person. It's, have you picked up the phone? Do you hang out where they hang out? Do you know anyone they know? And so there's lots of other opportunities, but we can get stuck in our own way of doing things and just have this repetitive behavior. If you look at Roger Federer as a different example, he built his assets of achievement by going and getting Stefan Edberg, who was the best serve volleyer in the 1980s, and said, I need you to coach me for the next 18 months. And in that period, I need to know how to work the points to shorten the points. And I have to get to the net to be able to serve and volley to create a new game. And so what Roger Federer did was, and it's interesting because while I say you build assets of achievement, the thing that's important to realize with this slide is Roger Federer didn't go and learn a whole new skill set. What he did was he just got more discerning about how he deployed his existing skills and how he used them based on the market he was in. And that's part of the trick with this comfort zone. We often say, oh, I'm working outside my comfort zone because things are a bit hard or we're finding them a bit challenging. But that isn't necessarily a good metric about whether you're in your results zone. Most of the time, we're just in comfort and feel like we're stretching because the work's getting harder. And we may just be doing the wrong sort of work. So taking your assets and deploying them and getting more discerning is a natural next step when you start to do the focus and you start to have implementation intention. You will start to see new ways of deploying your capability that naturally push you more into the result zone or get you thinking about that. I love this quote. I've been doing quite a lot of work with Cricket Australia over a number of years now, and it's one of my favourite quotes from Justin Langer about that when you think about running your own business or anything, really, playing cricket for Australia, running your own business, getting fit, most people can live the dream. Most people can live the hitting the winning runs at a Boxing Day test, for JL's example, or for us as business owners, it's building the product that we can scale and sell and make a huge profit, or we build a product that has the impact that we want it to have in the community that we're trying to serve. everyone can live that dream. But we know, because you're on this call as business owners, that it's a lot of dancing with fear. It's a lot of managing difficult people. It's a lot of trying to pitch your product to people who don't necessarily get it or want to buy it, or it's getting the early adopters to help get people into that bigger market share that we're trying to chase. And that reality of hard work is where not many people can really survive. It starts to separate those who are willing to and those who want to. And so my challenge for you in terms of turning up to this call about delivering results in a demanding context and where this works, I think, for performance, whether that's you as a leader, the team that you're responsible for, or the organization that you are responsible for, is there are liabilities that we have, performance liabilities, when the definable moments come and our intellectual capital, what we know we should be doing, and our performance capital, what we actually do in that moment, is misaligned and there's a gap. And so my challenge to you over the course of the next week is to start to look for where those gaps are. That'll start to get you thinking about how you define these definable moments. So a couple of simple examples is you might go to a meeting that you think is a waste of time with the person who's wasting your time, but we sit there for an hour and let that happen. Or we naturally have hour-long meetings because that's the default of our calendar, rather than say, how long does this take? Or we don't say no to opportunities to allow a yes for another opportunity somewhere else. So we keep saying yes to things because we don't want to miss out maybe the next opportunity that's a good one, but we're not discerning about where we're investing our time, effort, attention. So I hope that makes sense to you to tie a little bit of this together, is that I think paying attention to tension is a simple idea, but it's not a small one. I think when you start to look at it, it can change the way you work, lead, and live for the things or doing the work that matters to you and motivates you. So start looking for those moments when you feel this tension and you say, this is a definable moment, and am I doing the work that moves me forward or am I not? And if this has been helpful enough for you in terms of a conversation, I hope it has. That's terrific. If you'd like a little bit more depth and how to process this thinking a little bit more, then take a screenshot of this or just make note, or perhaps we could copy it and paste it into the chat box for people. I've just created a resource for you about a process that you might have to start to tame the tension that might exist for you in your own world. So two things to note about that. One, if you download that, I'm not going to take your email and then send you 600 more marketing emails afterwards. There's a box there to tick if you want more access to some of the work that I do, some free webinars and things like that. You can tick that box. Otherwise, you can download the thing and never hear from me again. That's up to you. And maybe the call's been enough. But I hope it's been helpful in looking at when we're in that moment where we start to feel like things aren't working, we've absolutely got choice about how we define those moments. And that helps us do more of that work that does make an impact and move things forward and make a difference. So I hope it's helped get you thinking about that. And obviously, I'd love to have some time and questions if there are some that have come through.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really great. So we have one from Liz here. She said, great content, Andrew. When something catches you off guard, so maybe like an ambush, if you will, what are some ways we can reset our mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question, Liz. The way I'd ask that is I often talk to my clients about transition moments. So I think in the moment itself, we just need to take a pause and if we can create some space, but that's not always possible in the moment. So that would be the first sort of piece of advice, is ask for some time to say, look, can I just have some time to think about that? Or I wasn't aware that's what we were going to talk about today. Just fill me in with what you need and then I'll come back to you. I just might need some time to process. So it's just whatever that comment is that gives you a little bit of space between the activity and your response. That's probably the first thing. The second piece of advice around these transition moments is if you think about your day around from getting out of bed to jumping in the shower, or jumping in the shower and getting in your car, or getting in your car and driving into work, or going from one meeting back to your desk. There are 1,000 transition moments during the day. And one of the ways I talk to my clients about maintaining energy that allows us to deal with these ambushes is use those transition moments to restore or replenish your energy in some way. That may be through breathing techniques. It may be about listening to a great podcast. It could be about having just a song that's in the car that gets you motivated. It could be about writing a list down before you leave the office so that you're present to your family and you're defragging the day. But why I'm suggesting that to answer your question, Liz, is that we know our energy depletes throughout the day. And if we don't restore it, those ambushes start to really derail us quickly. Where if we have these restorative moments throughout the day that help us stay at our best, we can deal with those ambush moments a lot more easily and effectively.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this is a question from Sam NZ. He said, how do you think we can build resilience, especially during a time when we're in partial lockdowns and can't do a lot of face-to-face and we're all zoomed out? And then, second part to that question, and any advice for founders we'll come back to that. Sorry. So answer the first question first. So it's around building resilience.
Sure. Look, I think zoomed out, I think is a really good point. I think we all are. Look, apart from the typical advice around resilience about, looking at gratitude and finding things to be pleasant for or grateful for, one of the things I've noticed with Zoom meetings is people actually aren't treating them like a real meeting. And so people are doing emails and doing other things. And so we are losing that human connection like we would be meeting. And so while people are turning up, I think they're not really showing up. So for any meeting that you're having, outside of doing, lame team building things or starting off, I would actually be creating a human connection by talking to people about some expectations, switching off phones, shutting down emails, and making the meeting really meaningful for people, and having a human connection. Even though it's not as good as face-to-face sometimes, we need to treat it like a face-to-face meeting like we would. And I think that would give us a huge uplift through a sense of connection, even though it's through technology, rather than be half listening, typing on the email and not really present. And so we're doing a whole lot of these Zoom meetings that doesn't have a lot of value. So that's the first thing. The second thing around building resilience that I would recommend for people is, I call it currency. So I think we have a currency in the work that we do is we get paid for our work. So that's one type of currency that we earn. And as a leader, I would be making sure that you are aware of the currency that your staff or you need in this period to feel good. So for some people, it might be, I just want to feel like someone's there looking after me. Or for someone else, they want to make a contribution. Or for someone else, they want to use this time to do the side hustle or to get fit. And if you know what that currency is for your staff or for yourself, what are you really turning up to work to do in this period? That can help escalate motivation really, really quickly. And often we're in the time and the task and the stuff, and not necessarily in the things that give our work meaning and motivate people to do the work. I hope that answers the question. What was the second part, Danny?
Yeah, awesome. No, it definitely does. So this is unrelated. Any advice on how to deal with founders or boards that keep changing their minds on a decision? So I think that kind of goes back to feeling that pressure and like you're not sort of in the in control there with the decision making.
Yeah, it's a difficult one in a short answer. So for the person who's answering the question, if it's helpful to you, just my email is just andrew@andrewhorsfield.com. So if you want more information, I'm happy to have a conversation if this isn't suffice with you. So feel free to get in touch. And that goes for anyone on the call if I can help in any way. But I think the answer I give is it needs an honest conversation around the changing of the direction. So there seems to be a gap if I'm assuming that the board are making a decision that you either don't agree with or understand, and you need to balance that understanding out. And I think that's an honest conversation saying, look, the direction keeps changing and I don't feel I can execute my role under that constant change. So we need to have some better way of operating that either gets you more skilled or stepping up to that change and why it's happening so that you can focus on the right work, or it's getting the board aware that they are trying to catch too many things and nothing's landing. And it will be an honest conversation about what you're experiencing that takes a bit of courage. So that's a bit of comfort zone into results zone, of being open to say, let's have this conversation and stop it getting from the margins into the center of what we're doing. And a metaphor you might use is a cheetah, doesn't just burst out of the grass and swipe it at everything that runs past. It sits and stalks to be able to launch out and say, this is the thing I'm going to chase down and kill. And that's how it gets fed. If it just bursts out of the grass and doesn't have a good focus, then it's very, very difficult for it to catch the one that it's identified that it can catch and kill and eat for that day. So I think it's a really honest conversation, but not around the edges. It's getting to the real heart of the matter and having that courageous conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great answer. Just want to say a big thank you on behalf of myself, Blackbird, and everyone who's joined us today for your time and all of your advice, Andrew. It was absolutely awesome. So everyone has Andrew's email and now you have the kind resources that he's supplied as well. Big thank you for joining us this morning and have a great morning, everyone. Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.